Trotman is where you're there. Trotman, what you gonna say?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of Governance, Corruption, and Justice. First off, we would like to apologize for the late start. The program was intended to start at 7:20, but due to some technical difficulties, we were delayed. With that being said, I would like to introduce our guest for tonight's program, Dr. Vincent Adams. He is the former head of the Environmental Protection Agency. Dr. Adams, thank you so much for being part of tonight's program.
Nice being here again, Kiana.
No, not a problem. Now, I know the time is against us, so I will try to get started right away. And the first matter that I would like for us to discuss has to do with the fact that flaring is once again part of our oil and gas journey. We thought that we would have left it behind in 2020, but once again, it is here with us in 2021. ExxonMobil would have said last Friday that it's been forced to flare again. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the term flaring, it involves the burning of gas, and that burning releases toxic chemicals into the atmosphere. It pollutes the atmosphere, and there's some really horrible consequences when that happens. So ExxonMobil has said that it's been forced to flare again, and that's because of its malfunctioning gas compressor. It would have said that a seal is providing some sort of technical issue, and that matter is yet to be resolved. So, Dr. Adams, I know that this is a matter that you would have tackled while you were at the Environmental Protection Agency, and I would like to know just your preliminary thoughts on the fact that this has now been another issue that's facing us. I mean, there's so many others in the oil industry that we have to deal with, but flaring once again has raised its ugly head. How do you feel about this, sir?
Well, of course, Kiana, you know that this year is rather very disappointing. First of all, this is totally avoidable. As you recall, this year was an issue that when I was at EPA, it was we went through a very frustrating time for what, close to a year, or just when I left there, very close to a year. And one of the issues that, well, we found several issues. And like I said, it's totally unavoidable. Here, you're supposed to have new equipment coming into a new FPSO. And the question that we keep when we had this continuous reoccurrence, we keep asking Exxon, well, this can we know that this is not the first operation you've ever had to use similar type of compressors, etc. And so why is Guyana so different? And nobody could answer the question. So that's the big question mark out there, which leaves, which asks the bigger question as to whether Exxon somehow is treating Guyana in a way that it's either disrespect or uncaring as far as Guyana is concerned, despite all of their utterances otherwise. Um, you get, you question their real intent and genuineness when, for example, Exxon says that flaring is okay in Guyana because, we are, of course, a carbon sink, meaning that we've got, it's okay, you guys have a whole lot of capacity. And that was one of their justifications that they were using to say it's okay to flare and while we're going through the Payaro um, um, permits and the FDP. So those are the kinds of things that shows, that raises question as to their real intent. As you know, um, Exxon had promised from day one, and I wasn't here, but it's on record in the people who attended these meetings in their notes, etc. Exxon had promised from day one, I think it's 2016, when during the preliminary negotiations and technical discussions, they promised that they will not flare from day one. But of course, I didn't take it literally to mean the first day, because there's maybe a couple of days or so, like 48 hours as allowed by the U.S. regulation. So said from day one we're not going to flare. Well, of course, the rest of the story. We flared until after over day 300, and they came back with a different story after we started, trying to say, hey, you're not allowed to flare, because the permit specifically says, all of the permit says, you cannot flare under normal circumstance. You could only flare on emergencies, etc., which is acceptable and it's understandable. But then they were using their big excuse was, well, we're still in startup mode. The permit says, during startup you can flare. We are still in startup mode, which was ridiculous, to be honest. Remember, I've said this over and over in my previous presence on this on your show, that it's ridiculous for them to be saying that we're still in startup mode when we're producing at full capacity and even selling the product on the market. But nevertheless, we decided we're going to go back and change it in the PIR and change it in all of the other permits to really restrict them and change the language. So that was the intent. Of course, I left before all of that happened. And I know we had, everything was drafted and ready to go as far as, what the position of the EPA was when I was there. I don't know what happened afterwards, but what's so disturbing about this incident here is that, the other thing is, as you recall, an action that we took was at after we were just getting they were running out of excuses and we couldn't find a solution to this problem. We decided we were only going to allow them to operate at a very small percentage, at the minimum operation possible, which was at about 30,000 barrels per day, to bring down the gas to minimum flaring, which was about between 12 to 15,000. Million, standard cubic feet per day. So we imposed that upon them. Of course, that went on for, I think, several months, etc. So I was expecting, this is the most disappointing part of it, I was expecting when this happened again with the same occurrence with the same failure of equipment, which is defective seal. When it happened, I would have expected that the authorities would have said, hey, you got to go down back immediately to, at least, is either you shut down or you go down back to the minimum capacity that the EPA mandated the last time. So I was expecting that to be the rule of the day, only to be terribly disappointed that we are now allowing them to produce at full capacity, while expecting, hoping that within days or within a week or so that they're going to go back. But nevertheless, so that's the disappointing part of it. It's just as if we've decided to give Exxon whatever they want to do without impunity, without any regard for the environment. So that's where I stand.
Now, Dr. Adams, I just want to go back to part of what you said. During your time at the EPA, when it was found that ExxonMobil had this faulty gas compressor, you told them that they need to produce only 30,000 barrels of oil so that they can be within this range of 12 to 15 million cubic feet of gas being burnt. Now, if we are still allowing this company to not just produce, but to go beyond this 30,000 barrels of oil and actually continue producing 120,000 barrels of oil, common sense would say that ExxonMobil is being allowed to flare way beyond that 12 to 15 million cubic feet of gas range. Is that correct?
I'm sure that it's probably running. We, at least at the time when they were just ramping up, so they were about 100,000 barrels per day, close to 100,000 barrels per day, and they're producing gas at about 85 to 90 um, million cubic feet per day. And so I would expect now that they're probably somewhere about 100 you know
A
so
100 million cubic feet?
I don't know what the number is, to be honest. I don't know what the number is right now. uh,
No, but you would advocate for the EPA to release this information because right now what we're seeing is that the company is the one that actually informed the public of this instance. And what many are saying is that the EPA should have been proactive in informing the public that this is what it has found and this is the action that has been taken as a result. Are you disappointed with the sort of laid back approach that's being taken by the EPA, which is supposed to be the key regulator for this sector?
well, one of the things that I've always said, and as a matter of fact, when I took the job, I took it under the condition that the EP has, as the executive director, I've got to be given the authority and independence, and I will not work under any situation where there is political influence. Unfortunately for me, during my tenure, not a single politician, including the president, ever one day tried to influence my decisions. Now, policy, obviously, if there are policy things that I need to follow, obviously I will do whatever we do at the EP. It has to be in compliance with the policy of the government. But besides that, I hardly had any conversation with my ministers, which was Mr. Harmon, and at the time, basically. So yes, I do not know the circumstance as to. I know that I've been hearing the complaints from the media that the media has been requesting um, statements from the EPA, and the EPA has not been responding. Um, I do not know why, but if there's political influence there, that's not a good thing for the EPA. What I did observe was that the Minister Barrett, was making all the statements. Now, of course, when I was there, I didn't have, or the EPA didn't have ministers making statements for the EPA, because EPA has all the information. As a matter of fact, Exxon or EPGL is supposed to report when these incidents occurred, report it to the EPA. And so the EPA has all the technical information. The EPA has all the technical people, and they're the ones who should, in my opinion, and the way that I was operating, they're the ones who are supposed to be responding to the public and to the media inquiries. So to me, it's kind of disappointing, when you see the EPA I don't want to say that they're being muzzled, because I don't know why they're not responding. But when you see the minister responding for technical issues that I don't think that the minister is aware of the past history, etc. I don't think that that's the right thing, and I don't think that's in the best interest of transparency, because we are obligated to be transparent. We serve the public, we work for the public, and we are obligated to be transparent and to respond in a timely manner to the government. I'm sure that you guys, in your experience with me, there wasn't any time that you called me that I was not, willing, ready, and available to answer your question. It may not be the answer that you wanted, or it may not even be, very pleasant for me in terms of what I have to tell you. But nevertheless, you got the answers, which were always honest. And that's the way that I think the EPA ought to operate. So it's very disappointing when the minister is speaking for the EPA, and the EPA is not even saying a word. And I'm not blaming the EPA, because who knows why, or the instructions that the EPA is getting.
Thanks for that. Dr. Adams, we would have heard the first time when the news broke of ExxonMobil flaring offshore Guyana that there was issues experienced with the gas compressor system, and now we're hearing that that is the same issue again. In light of this, do you believe that it's high time that we do an independent probe or investigation to ascertain what is really going on out there and who's really at fault? Because at the moment, what we're hearing is ExxonMobil side. We're not hearing an independent review of the matter from the government. Do you believe it's high time that we find out for ourselves via an investigation what's going on?
Yes, I would have no problem because if you remember, we thought that we had addressed this issue. You remember after going through a
Yes.
year, but the thing is, we had mitigative actions now in the permit itself to at least that was what was proposed. So to put all the responsibility and accountability on Exxon. Well, because obviously, if we had gone by what what we were proposing or what we were fixing, in the permits, etc., Exxon would have been shut down now, or at the most they would have been producing at minimum production.
Is that
For
what would have happened if you were still there?
what? Well, no. If what would have happened is that they would have, as far as I'm concerned, this year would have been, they would not have been producing in full. That I can tell you.
Okay.
And we would have done what you were saying there is investigate what the issue is and how fast it's going to be fixed. But even producing at the minimum was not going to be going on for even weeks or months. That occurred in the past because they had their opportunity for an entire year to fix this problem. Like I said, there's something here that is inexplainable, that it's only happening in Guyana when they've got operations all over the world. This is new equipment.
Yes.
And one of the things, by the way, that bothers me, that I brought their attention several times, was I still question their quality assurance, quality control program, because anytime you go and ask a vendor to manufacture these type of important and major equipment, you're supposed to have these QA/QC plans that you're supposed to oversee to make sure that the specifications and everything else are in line. You can't wait until you bring it on board the ship to figure out, gosh, guess what? They've got the wiring wrong. They've got the wrong seals. The valves are bad. It's your problem. It's not the manufacturer's problem, because you've got all the exports, especially for a company like Exxon. You've got all the exports, so you should not wait until this moment. So yes, I think an investigation would be very much in order, because if this happens so quickly after we thought that we had solved this issue, you fool me once. What does it say? You fool me once.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
Exactly right. So now we're in this position where we're on our second go round here. So something we need to get to the bottom of it to find out what's, because remember, this is only the first FPSO.
Yes. And it's very early on in the production, in the life of the project too, that we're already experiencing these difficulties.
So we better fix it here right now, rather than wait until we've got 10 FPSOs running, or 20 for, depending on the other operators. And then we've got problems all over the place. At least we're in a bizarre way, we're lucky that it's only one FPSO we've got running. But the other thing that you always remember, that I always emphasize, and I'll keep beating it to death, is that the EPA has to be given the resources. And one of the key resource is, you remember we worked with the World Bank to establish oil and gas unit of 36 highly skilled employees, even identifying the qualifications and the personnel that we need. That was supposed to be in last year's budget, but of course, because of COVID.
Yes.
So that should not be put on the back burner either. That should be a critical part of the program as we move along, to have those people on board, including 24/7 presence on the FPSO, because I'd be willing to bet you, and I tell my staff this all the time, when the contractor themselves, they're reporting incidents, when you go see it for yourself, over 90% of the time, it's totally different to what they're reporting, to what actually exists on board. And even the way that they operate, that and the mistakes that they make, then they cut corners. I'm not saying that that's what's happening here, but just in my experience, if you do not have an eyes looking over their shoulder, etc., they're gonna try to do it the easy way, and try to cut corners. We see it already that is happening there. You remember those leaky hoses, simple things as leaky hoses in their maintenance program. Exxon claim that they've got the best maintenance program in the world, and if they cannot, the manufacturer's specification says you've got to inspect these hoses, that for lubrication oil, etc. You got to inspect these hoses before you. They had 6 incidents within a year where the hoses were not inspected. They had it in their own procedures and the manufacturer's recommendation. And yet, now if you can't take care of the little things, it's the same mindset you're going to take to the bigger things with higher risk. And then the next thing you know, we all are going to be sorry what may happen, because it's the little things that cause major problems by not following procedures. Procedures are developed for safety reasons. And you remember the spill of the mud, the 76 barrels of mud. Guess what? The contractor say, hey, you know what? There's only mud. That's not anything to the water. So immediately, what I did, I sent my office out there immediately with a team to go investigate what the problem was. And as you may recall, it was totally different to what they were reporting. It was a serious situation that could have caused that ship to have an explosion, because the mud was being dumped into the ocean because of a valve, instead of the mud going back into the hole, because it's the weight of the mud that keeps the well from blowing out and for bringing the cuttings to the surface. So you could have a serious blowout if somebody did not pass by and see that mud being dumped because of a leaky valve being dumped into the ocean. But that was a small thing. Now, when they reported, the only thing that was reported, we dumped, there were 76 barrels of mud that didn't have any impact to the environment. So that's how it was reported. But again, I'm getting back to what I said before. What was reported could almost certainly be totally different to the condition that exists. So that is why a 24/7 presence is absolutely important.
Dr. Adams, I want to just close off on this matter here in relation to the possible risk that we're placing our health and environment against. There are many within the industry who have taken note of the increased flaring, this recent report by ExxonMobil, and the reaction of the government. And they're saying that by keeping the production levels at an all-time high, the nameplate production being 120,000 barrels of oil per day, that is actually going to result in more flaring, and by extension, we're placing the health of Guyanese and even the environment in grave danger. Are you in agreement with such a perspective?
Sure. Any emissions in the environment, and of course, where I stand in any project, especially projects such as this that will have impacts to the environment. You always weigh the risk versus benefit. There will always be risk, but then you have to weigh the economic benefit. There's always a risk to even driving your automobile. A lot of people die on a daily basis throughout the world just driving an automobile, but you don't stop driving your automobile. You don't stop flying an airplane because it's emitting stuff. However, that is why you have controls and permits. You allow a certain level where you keep it to a minimum in terms of impact in the environment. So anytime you go above what's expected, like flaring, when you flare, you have to maintain a pilot light, the pilot of the flare, which is just a small amount you're burning at all time, because you don't want the pilot to go out and in case of emergency, you can't flare the gas. So, but anytime you go over that, for example, you should not be burning more, or the permit says you cannot be burning more than what you for that pilot light, unless there's an emergency and it has to go through. But that emergency is only for a very short period of time until the equipment stabilizes and you clear all the lines of the gas, etc. But anything over and above that definitely impacts the environment. I've been, I'm not an expert in that type of stuff, but I've been reading the millions of trees that would be sacrificed by just flaring this amount of the billions standard cubic feet of gas that we are flaring on this one project. And again, remember, this area is only going to be one project with 120 something thousand barrels per day. What happens when we get to 1,000,000 barrels per day and you have ships all over? And so, yes, without question, there is impact. I'm not an expert in telling you what the impact is to trees, etc. But I do know. Remember, now it has 250 pollutants. That gas alone contains over 250 pollutants. So you can't say that it's not impacting the environment. But again, the risk that you allow is, in this particular case, is just for the very small risk of keeping the pilot flame going, because that's important for in a case of emergency. But we cannot allow, like we're doing right now, especially when we bent over backwards for an entire year, we should not be allowing them to be burning at full capacity right now when we've got an incident. This is not, as a matter of fact, this is violation of the permit. The permit says you can only burn or flare under normal production. This is not normal production when you have a major piece of equipment out of service. So we're violating the permit without question.
Thank you very much for that contribution, Dr. Adams. We'll go to a quick commercial break and we will return to continue our discussion on Guyana's oil and you. Good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen. If you're now joining us, this is this week's episode of Governance, Corruption, and Justice. And tonight we have with us the former head of the Environmental Protection Agency, Dr. Vincent Adams, and we're discussing a most important issue, that is flaring, which ExxonMobil reported on Friday last, that it has been forced to continue to burn more gas than its required pilot levels, and that would result in the release of toxic chemicals into our airspace, thereby endangering the health of Guyanese as well as our environment. Dr. Adams, I know that we would have discussed a lot on this matter during the first chapter of our program this evening. And on the second aspect, I'd like to turn your issue to an issue that has been following us from since 2015, and that has to do with Guyana getting a fair deal from the Stabroek Block operations. Now, I know that even from the day you were appointed, you have always been a staunch advocate for the renegotiation of the Stabroek Block deal, and there are many provisions which industry analysts have said require changing for the benefit of the people. But just to hear from you, Dr. Adams, what is, well, just not one, but what are some of the key provisions that we need to improve on? I know that you would have shown during your time at the EPA that it is possible to make changes to this deal, as you were able to get the oil companies to move from self-insurance to full coverage and to obey the industry standards. So what for you are some of the key provisions that we need to change in this contract?
Well, let me caveat what I'm going to say here. This is not to be as a criticism. We've been 5 years or so after that. As a matter of fact, that contract was signed in 1999.
Yes,
So
and
there
then
was
revised in 2016.
It was signed in 1999 by the Honorable Her Excellency Janet
Janet
Jagan,
Jagan, yeah.
and then it was revised in 2016.
Yes.
It was actually signed by Minister, by the coalition government.
Yes.
But there was very little change to that document, as far as I can recall. The only thing that would change was the royalty from 1% to 2%, and I think that was the
Well, they made quite a few other changes to the contract, such as the stabilization clause, for example.
clause, etc. But hey, my main and the other thing, and I know that people call it the Trotman contract, but I think it's kind of unfair, because I'm sure that he did not sign that contract all by himself. So it was a collective agreement, with the entire government. So I think it's unfair when people bash the minister. But nevertheless, we should not, in terms of looking back, rather than criticizing, we should use this as a lessons learned. At the time, it was the best information available. We were hurried to go get the oil, etc., out to the ground to make to boost the economy, etc. And all were on board, in terms of the government of the country to get this contract. So we signed the contract, but now we look back, we should realize that we should have done there were some weaknesses in that contract that we need to fix now, and nobody can tell me that we can't fix it. Because even at the EPA, we show that we can fix it with the unlimited liability insurance. That they were resisting like heck, and we stood our grounds. They even threatened to bring in the president, etc., and we stood our ground, and they yielded to what they think is right. So we should try. At least make an effort, and I'll be willing to guarantee you that there's no way that they will be saying that they're not coming to the table. We've got a major part of their entire portfolio is Guyana. Guyana is a key place, Guyana and West Texas. But the fundamental part of that contract that I've said from day one, since 2016, that has to be changed is we have to get out of this production sharing agreement into a straight concession type contract where your revenue comes from royalty and taxes. We do not have, not even close to capacity, to oversee and monitor a production sharing contract. When Exxon comes in and say, because we get paid anything over cost oil, which means with the cost of operation, When Exxon go on hire companies, their subsidiaries, etc., where is who do we have to go out there and check their books when they say this is what it's costing them? So that is our problem. Whereas if you have a concession contract, all we need to do is we can check the number of barrels that they sell in the market. It's easy for us to know the prices of the oil in the market, and that's all we need to do. But we have no capacity, not even close right now, to monitor and check what exactly is cost oil. So now we are ending up with what 12 and a half barrels, over the 75% cost oil. And the other thing, that 75% could go on forever. Because remember, it's even the investment cost and the capital cost and everything is built into that 75%. And every year is they can roll over. They can come to us 1 year and say, well, guess what? Not 1 year, 1 month, and say, guess what? It's costing us 90 barrels, out of 100 barrels, because so they can say it's costing us 90 barrels this month. So that 15 barrels goes over to the next month. You see? So even though you cap at 75, if it goes anyone, it goes over into the next month to be added to that month's tally. This can go on forever with the billions that we've already owed in capital cost and operation, etc. But the thing is, they can come with all kinds. I'm not saying that this here is what they're doing or what they intend to do. And we should have experienced this.
This is what we're exposing ourselves to.
Well, we had a similar situation with the bauxite. I grew up in Linden. I grew up in a bauxite town. We had this very same situation when we came to nationalization, and we couldn't agree on exactly what the book value was. I remember that distinctly, and it was because of this same issue, where they sell to their subsidiaries, etc. They've got a separate cost, and so we should get out of. And a lot of countries are moving away from this production sharing arrangement. It's a nightmare. We should move on to straight concession type contract where you say, well, okay, all I need is 25% or 30%, whatever number you have. And so for every 100 barrels you produce, I'm going to get 25 barrels or 30 barrels. And all I need to do now is find people who can verify that the amount of barrels that you produce, which means that you have, a few people out on the ship to make sure the meter is running correctly, to make sure you counting those barrels correctly. And you have some people in the finance world to make sure that this is the price that you're getting for the oil, because those are published numbers. But when you get into this thing, you got to go back and check, well, the contracts, all these contracts that they've got, the hundreds of contracts and contractors that they've got, you've got to go, and for every say, we can't even come close to having the.
Dr. Adams, you mentioned something there about the metering. One of the weaknesses also of the PSA, the Production Sharing Agreement that we're part of, is that there's absolutely no provision that speaks to how we will go about ensuring good governance for the measurement of the oil. We have nothing in that agreement that says what advanced systems we are going to put in place for the independent monitoring. So do you believe that is something that we need to change? I mean, I understand your perspective that we need to get out of the PSA types arrangement that we have because we just don't have the capacity to properly govern all the moving parts of it. But would you say that we need to put some provision in there that ensures we are well protected in the area of measurement of the oil and gas production?
That's a key area. And I do not know. I think I don't know. I guess the GRA, that's their responsibility right now. I'm not sure, but nevertheless, it's a key area where you have to have precision, accuracy.
Yes.
The other thing is you got to know whether it's measured at the wellhead itself or whether it's measured at at another point in the line, etc. However, just think about it. Just a very, very small percentage, just a small fraction of a percentage, multiply that by billions, can cost you, hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's very important. You are absolutely correct. But I do not know what was the processes and procedures that are currently in place. So I really can't comment. but it's key area that definitely has to always have an eye on top of it, and with really really a lot of scrutiny without question.
Thanks for that, Dr. Adams. We've come to the concluding segment of our program, and we would just like to invite you to provide your thoughts on Guyana's future as an oil producing state. We are embarking on the second year, and it's marked by the issue of flaring once again. It's followed us from 2020 into 2021. Now, just give us your concluding thoughts on that, and what are some of the key things you believe we need to accomplish this year?
Well, let me say this loud and clear, and you know that I've said this over and over. I support oil production. I support development. Period. I support the gas to shore pipeline. I support, as a matter of fact, believe it or not, I support the rapid production of oil, the highest, the highest rate possible to get it out to the ground so that we can benefit. However, everything has to be done in a safe and environmentally sound manner. So that's all I'm asking for. And we all the plans with the project. I think it's a good thing for the country. However, we should not make production a precedent or a priority over protection of the health, safety, and environment of the people of Guyana and the country. And that ought to be, the fundamental policy of this government, to make sure that happens. But then it bothers me when I hear that, the past, when I was at the EPA, we put one thing in place with set up some controls in place to make sure that doesn't happen. For example, cutting back the operation to minimum flaring, etc. And then it happens again, and then we hear that the government is saying, no, it's okay, you can go ahead and burn at maximum possible, and and let's hope that you get this thing fixed as soon as possible. I think that's totally irresponsible and uncaring of the people's health and the environment. So what I would like to see this year, of course, as an urgency, is to make sure that we've got proper oversight, make sure that as a policy, a fundamental policy is that the health, safety, and the environment will be much higher priority than production. Production has to be secondary, and as long as we maintain good high standard of safety and protecting the environment, production is going to come along. You're not going to get these upsets that we're having. The two go together. If you as long as you maintain good conduct of operations, health and safety, production is going to come along, because you're not going to get these type of upsets. So that's what I'm asking. I'm asking specifically for the EPA to be funded fully this year, so that they can go out there and hire the right people to man that unit that we set up there to provide oversight for the oil and gas sector.
Okay, thank you very much for your contribution, Dr. Adams. As usual, it's always a pleasure to have you here, and we do hope that we can have you back, not just on governance, corruption, and justice, but also our other program, Guyana's Oil and You, where you can provide us with, your expertise and insightful inputs on Guyana's oil and gas sector. So thanks again for being part of the program. And to our listeners, viewers, wherever you may be, thank you for also participating in tonight's discussion. And we do look forward to having you part of our program for this week and for those to follow. Do have a good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and remember to stay safe.